Hello, Calling Up community. I'm Claudia Alick, and today I will be reflecting on disabled justice, corporate communications, online and social media, different ways the disabled community advocates for their rights, and also performative accessibility. So this is a reflection on a Twitter exchange and also on some corporate communications. So for the last few days, Ola Ojuwume, who's a disabled justice advocate, not sure if I pronounced her name correctly because we have never met in real life, but she's at Ola's_truth. She has been tweeting for days and days about rideshare companies and their lack of access and good service to customers who use wheelchairs. And so she tweets, "When is Lyft going to get wheelchair accessible vehicles?" And the first comment is from @AskLyft. Why? Because corporations, like she didn't @Lyft or hashtag Lyft, right? But corporations have algorithms that are constantly searching for their name to be mentioned in regular people's communication, so they can enter into that communication and try to sell us something or try to interrupt us communicating poorly about their company. So she asks, when is Lyft going to get wheelchair accessible vehicles? And AskLyft replies immediately, "Hi there. The wheelchair accessibility option is available for riders that have wheelchairs that can fold up to fit in a car's trunk or backseat without obstructing the driver's view. If you want more info." And they have wheelchair policy. So I'm going to click on that. Before I reflect what the community said, we're just going to do a close read of what is their wheelchair policy. So the first thing we see is that we've been taken to a page that is Lyft Help, under policies and other info, anti-discrimination, and then that's where you would find their wheelchair policy. So, as a corporate entity, Lyft recognizes that not serving disabled customers is discriminatory, which is why their wheelchair policy is under an anti-discrimination section, I'm assuming. Now, this is a section that's for drivers, so it's curious that this is what they sent people, rather than the other link. There's another link they could have sent, but they sent this, their wheelchair policy for drivers. Lyft's policy is that passengers who use wheelchairs that can safely and securely fit in a car's trunk or backseat without obstructing the driver's view should be reasonably accommodated by drivers on the Lyft platform. Drivers should make every reasonable effort to transport the passenger and their wheelchair. If you refuse to provide a ride to a passenger whose wheelchair could be reasonably accommodated, we'll follow up with you to find out why. Drivers who found to have unreasonably refused to transport passengers with lightweight wheelchairs that can be dismantled or folded are liable to be removed as drivers on the Lyft platform. Let's break that down. So first of all, the first responsibility lies with you, the customer, to have an accessibility device that fits within what they need. They do not have wheelchair accessible vehicles. They just have regular vehicles, random regular vehicles that could be a Jeep, that could be a van, that could be a very small compact car. There are no rules, and there's no way of knowing. It'll be any vehicle that Lyft driver is driving. It's not wheelchair accessible. So the wheelchair policy is, we do not have wheelchair accessible vehicles. It doesn't say that, but that's the first thing that you have to know. That's right there. And then it says, all right, so you, the wheelchair user, have to have something that can be safely and securely fit in a car's trunk. Any car's trunk, I suppose. There's no language about dimensions, width, how empty or not empty that trunk should be, but I guess any theoretical car's trunk or back seat that doesn't obstruct the driver's view. Also, it needs to be lightweight, and it has to be able to be dismantled or foldable. Now, if all of those are true for you, the customer, then the next piece of responsibility lies solely and completely in the driver's hands. The driver must make reasonable efforts. What does reasonable mean? Well, reasonable is a vague term that allows for there to be no accountability. Now, as you scroll through this, you see that they have accessibility tips. It's a little video that says, watch this video for an overview of how to help passengers who are wheelchair users, visually impaired, hard of hearing, or deaf. It's not a great video. It's not. It's definitely not enough, and it's not very good. So it's super inadequate what they're providing there. But the information in that video is not 100% inaccurate. So there's that. And it's something, but it's not enough. It's not training. It's it's a video that doesn't do much. Okay, passenger transfer, sections on that, wheelchair loading tips, foldable wheelchairs, rigid frame wheelchairs. Then here at the end, if a wheelchair doesn't fit, sometimes larger wheelchairs can't be accommodated. That's what I like to call the exonerative tense. That's when you craft a sentence that makes it seem like things just exist. They don't exist because someone made them that way. They just are. So it's not that always Lyft doesn't have wheelchair accessible vehicles that can accommodate all wheelchairs. It's just that sometimes larger wheelchairs can't be accommodated. After making a reasonable effort to load the chair, drivers should cancel the ride. The official policy is that they should cancel it. So that's them saying, yeah, make your best effort and cancel the ride. Then, if this happens, drivers should also notify us by tapping Call Me. We're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. After you contact us, we'll reach out to the passenger with accessible resources in their region. So, this is the story of what happens. You, the passenger, expect to not be discriminated against by the app Lyft. So you call for a car. The car comes to get you, but they don't have wheelchair accessible vehicles. They are discriminating against you, but the driver has to waste their time, which is money out of their pocket, and also waste your time by coming to get you and then making all of the most reasonable, whatever that means, efforts to get your car in their back seat. Now, if you decide to complain about that, well, and then when they can't do it, they have to call. They have to spend their own time. Again, they don't get paid for this. They have to spend their own time to call the companies, and the company can call you, the customer, so that you, the customer, can spend your time that you're not getting paid for or compensated to let them know this is happening to me. Or if the driver doesn't do what they're supposed to do and contact the corporation, you, the customer, can also directly contact the corporation saying, hey, I'm not getting served. But what will happen? Not a change in policy, not an addition of wheelchair accessible vehicles. No, that driver, that individual driver, might get fired. It's a system of discipline and punishment, but not really a system of accountability or system-wide change and greater accessibility. But let's see what happens when they say they're going to reach out to the passenger with accessible resources in their region. I click on that, and it takes me to an entire page that's actually there for the rider. So that's nice. So this is under Lyft Help, Riding with Lyft, Request a Ride, Accessible Vehicle Dispatch. So it has an entire paragraph talking about their access mode that you can enable on the site. And it says, in certain markets, with access mode enabled, passengers may request a vehicle that's specially outfitted to accommodate wheelchairs. In markets where those vehicles are not available, information regarding local services will be sent directly to the passenger via text message when the ride is requested. Market-specific dispatch options, including access mode availability, are listed below. To enable access mode, then they've got the directions and they've got the thing. Now, I have access mode enabled on my phone, and when I tried to use it, it told me, oh, we only have information for accessible services in SF County. So we can't even tell you what's accessible in your neighborhood. But here's the thing. I know that there's paratransport in my community because I'm signed up for it. And here's the next paragraph of information they provide. Local accessible vehicle dispatch services. Many of the below accessible vehicle dispatches must be booked at least 24 hours in advance. In order to utilize their service, you may want to consider first reaching out to the local dispatch to inquire about their sign-up process. Depending on the vendor, it may take several weeks to complete the enrollment process before being able to book a ride in their prospective cities. So generally what you have to do is you get a piece of paperwork. You have that piece of paperwork signed by your doctor. Generally that costs you some money. Usually it's like a $15 copay or something if you've got health insurance. The doctor signs a piece of paper. You get that piece of paper to that institution. They take whatever time it is to do their paperwork. They send you a card in the mail, and it's that card and only that card that allows you to have access to those additional transportation services. But those are not things that Lyft is actually providing. What Lyft is saying is, hey, if you click the button, we might send you a text message with other people you could call for help. It's the equivalent of me having like a pizza parlor, but saying, I serve all food. But when you come to me and ask for fried chicken, I write down the address for Popeyes and I send you on your way. That's not accessibility. That's performative accessibility. That's having a lot of content on your website that wants to tell the story of how you're accessible, but you're not. And a better communication from them would have been, we do not have wheelchair accessible services. We are working on increasing wheelchair accessible vehicles in all of our areas. We apologize for not serving you well, and we promise to do better in the future. That's, of course, not what they say, though. What they say is something that wants to pretend and perform accessibility. Hi, the wheelchair accessibility options are available for riders. But the question was, when is Lyft going to get wheelchair accessible vehicles? Not what are your wheelchair accessible options. And your options are, you have no options except for if it fits in a trunk. Probably like it's against the rules for them to refuse to try and put it in the trunk. This is the response from the community, which I love, and it's way more than I could ever read because it's a lot. I do not think wheelchair accessibility means what you think it means at Lyft, and they directly at the company. That's very literally not a WAV, LOL. Thank you, girl, nobody known as the... let's see. Laura says, cool. So it's not wheelchair accessible. Here's someone saying, here for the ratio Lyft. That's not wheelchair accessibility. Nice try. Somebody saying, this is actually not wheelchair accessibility. Stop advertising that it is and patting yourself on the back. Gail says, so there is no accessibility option, basically. Katza, so it's not accessible, period. Half-assed accessibility is not accessibility. Wheelchair accessibility doesn't mean what you said. Most long-term wheelchair users have wheelchairs that can't fold at all. Maybe the backrest, but that's it. You need to do better as in have to. It's not optional. Another person who's saying that they're here for the ratio, which means that they, as a Twitter user, understand that the more of us that say that response, corporate entity, was not only ineffective, it was a lie. It's not true, and it's actually inflamed us and made us angrier at you. Because instead of saying, we don't have the thing you asked, instead of just staying out of it, you came in and then you lied to us and were like, oh, you've asked what wheelchair accessibility vehicles, when we're going to get that? Well, we do this that literally doesn't serve your needs. So, that is performative accessibility. Unfortunately, you will actually find that many corporations and many institutions feel like they can have the optics of justice without actually having the engagement and actions of justice. And generally, we the people, we know better, right? Unfortunately, for many of us, we don't feel like we have a choice. I know I personally have all the taxi cabs in my phone, and I try to prepare myself for success for every business trip I do. But ultimately, I can't prepare and do the paperwork and the 2 to 3 week process that it's necessary to make sure I have access to the public transportation options that are available for disabled people in that community, which is why I'm willing to pay money for a commercial option. But the commercial option has to serve its customers without discrimination. And the act of deciding that you will provide, because it's not like Lyft doesn't provide cars to some of its drivers. There are many drivers who rent their cars from Lyft. So why doesn't Lyft provide wheelchair accessible vehicles for them? I'm sure there's a reason. I look forward to hearing why. In the meantime, we can look at these exchanges and be inspired by the larger community. If you get the time, you should check out the little Twitter feed. Like I said, it's a lot of the same responses, but a few of them are international. There's people in Canada who talk about how, like, I guess apparently in British Columbia, they have a negative incentives program where if the rideshare fails the customer, they get fined, I think by the city or something, which creates a negative incentive for them to actually do better because they get a financial hit every time they fail a customer. Right now, the system that they have in place kind of ensures that the customer has a negative experience and the driver has a negative experience, and the company itself has no liability and also has no profit loss, which doesn't feel like a great model, for me, the person who's giving them all my money. All right, well, this was a reflection exercise on Twitter. I would say that this is less advice for you the communications person who's trying to communicate and advocate for your rights. And this is more of a piece of advice for the corporate entities who are trying to avoid giving good service to folks. But ultimately, it's still a learning. All right, happy day, calling up community.